I thought the checkup would be quick, but the way that doctor looked at me made everything tremble. I only came in for a refill on my HRT. Nothing more. But the moment she looked up from the chart and saw me, my world shifted like tectonic plates under pressure. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray, mind-numbing afternoon that makes hospitals feel even more like crypts. I sat stiffly in the chilly exam room, fidgeting with the hem of the paper gown, waiting for yet another doctor who probably wouldn't know how to pronounce my name, let alone respect my pronouns. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like irritated bees. When the door opened, I was expecting a rushed resident or some tired guy in a white coat with too many pens. But instead, in walked her. "Good afternoon, I'm Dr. Miriam Valdez," she said with a soft smile, her voice like chamomile tea, warm, calm, unexpected. She didn't look rushed. Or tired. Or distracted. No. Her eyes locked onto mine like I was someone worth seeing, not just another insurance claim in a gown. I swallowed. Hard. "Hi," I croaked, sounding 13 instead of 26. She sat down, glanced at the tablet, then looked back up. "River Lowell?" I nodded. "And your pronouns?" "They slash them," I said. I braced myself for a flinch. A micro-expression. Something. But it didn't come. "Got it," she said smoothly, tapping the screen. "Then, how long have you been on testosterone?" "Almost 4 years," I said. "I moved here from Portland last month and just need a new prescriber. My doctor there sent everything over, I think." She nodded again. "Yes, I have the records. Looks like your last dose was," she paused, then did something no other doctor had ever done. She put the tablet down. "Before we go into logistics," she said, "how are you doing? I mean you." No one had ever asked me that. Not like that. Not in that tone, like she actually cared about the answer. I blinked. "I guess I'm fine. New city. New job. Some days are harder than others." "Yeah," she said quietly. "They usually are." And just like that, we slipped into something I couldn't name. Something intimate, but not inappropriate. Her gaze wasn't flirty. It wasn't invasive. It was attentive. Gentle. Like she recognized something in me she'd once seen in herself or someone she'd loved. She examined me carefully, respectfully. Hands warm. Eyes warmer. We talked about dosages, lab work, insurance. All the usual things. But then, after listening to my heart, she hesitated before pulling back. "River," she said, not lifting the stethoscope, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you look in the mirror, do you feel like you're home yet?" It hit me like a punch in the lungs. My voice cracked. "Some days I do. Other days it still feels like I'm borrowing a body I haven't fully paid for." She closed her eyes for a moment. And when she opened them again, I saw something raw in them. Something unguarded. "I understand," she whispered. I wanted to ask how. I wanted to ask why this woman, this doctor, this stranger suddenly felt more familiar than some of my closest friends. But I didn't. I was scared the moment would pop like a soap bubble if I said too much. Instead, I said, "I didn't expect this." She tilted her head. "Expect what?" "To feel safe. In here." I gestured at the room. "With you." Her smile faltered, not out of guilt or discomfort, but something heavier. Neither did I. And then came the silence. Thick. Tender. Unspoken. I stared down at my hands, afraid of what I'd see if I looked up again. Afraid of what I wanted to see. But I did. I looked up. And she was still looking at me. We both knew something had shifted. It wasn't a crush. It wasn't lust. It wasn't even love, not yet. It was recognition. A soul ache. A door creaking open. She cleared her throat, like trying to shake off whatever just passed between us. "You'll need blood work before I can renew the script," she said, returning to the tablet. "Right," I said, my voice suddenly small. She handed me the lab slip, her fingers brushing mine. It wasn't accidental. I stood to leave. Paused at the door. "Thanks, Dr. Valdez." She looked up. Held my gaze one more time. "Call me Miriam." And I knew. This wasn't over. I walked out of the clinic with the lab slip crumpled in my hand and a heartbeat like a drumline. I wasn't sure if it was the hormones, the sterile air, or the way she said "call me Miriam," but something about it made the sidewalk feel different under my shoes. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in my new apartment, a tiny studio on the edge of downtown, half-unpacked boxes crowding the floor, staring at the water-stained ceiling and replaying every second of the exam room like it was a scene from a movie. Except in this one, I didn't know how to act. Who the hell was this woman? And why did it feel like she'd seen straight into the marrow of me? I kept telling myself it was just kindness. Doctors were supposed to be compassionate, especially when dealing with queer patients. Maybe I was reading into it. Maybe I was just lonely. But no, it was more than that. Something passed between us. I wasn't crazy. 2 days later, I showed up at the lab, had my blood drawn by a disinterested phlebotomist, and expected that to be the end of it. That same evening, I got an email from the clinic, "Results available. Dr. Valdez has left a note." I clicked. It was short. "Levels look good. Script sent to pharmacy. You're all set. Take care, River. Miriam." That's it. Clean. Professional. But then an hour later my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hi. This is Miriam. I hope it's okay I used the number in your file. Just wanted to make sure the pharmacy worked out." I stared at the message like it might bite me. After 3 minutes of internal screaming, I typed. "Yes. Picked it up already. Thanks again." The dots danced. "Good. And I hope you're settling into the city okay. If you ever need recommendations, coffee, bookstores, or otherwise, let me know." There it was again. That quiet current under her words. That something. I shouldn't respond. I knew better. She was a doctor. I was a patient. There were rules. Boundaries. And yet. I haven't found a good coffee shop yet. Got any favorites? 20 minutes later, we were texting like old friends. 2 days after that, we met for coffee. She chose a tucked-away queer-owned place called Beam Me Up on a side street lined with vines. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting outside with a book in her lap and sunglasses perched on her head. I almost turned around and ran. She looked up, smiled, and waved me over. "Decaf oat latte with a shot of hazelnut," she said, sliding a cup toward me. "You remembered." Of course I did. We talked for hours. Not about medicine. Not about hormones. Not about my body or her career. We talked about books. About how she grew up in El Paso with a Catholic mother and a sister who ran away at 16. About how she once wanted to be a writer, but ended up becoming a doctor because it felt like the safest kind of saving. I told her about Portland. About my ex who ghosted me the week after I got top surgery. About my love for vintage maps and bad reality TV. We didn't flirt. Not really. But every pause between sentences felt like a held breath. When we stood to leave, I asked, "So is this okay? Us talking like this?" She looked down at her cup. "It's a gray area," she admitted. "Technically, after today, you're not my patient anymore. Your prescription's good for a year. You can transfer care to someone else, and... I wasn't trying to get you in trouble, I blurted. I know, she said gently. And I wasn't trying to cross a line. But something happened that day, River. Didn't it? I nodded. Okay, she said, almost to herself. Okay. We didn't touch. But as we walked in opposite directions, I caught her looking over her shoulder. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other 3 more times. Once at a queer art show. Once at a farmer's market. Once in the back of a tiny poetry reading where she clutched my wrist when a line made her gasp. She never kissed me. She never even touched my hand. But I was falling. Hard. And then, one Thursday night, everything cracked. I was coming back from a drag show with my friend Jessa when I saw a message from Miriam. Emergency shift. ER triage. Some days I remember why I almost quit this job. I replied. You want to talk about it? Her response came 10 minutes later. I shouldn't. But yes. We met on a park bench near the hospital at midnight. She was still in scrubs, her hair tied up in a messy knot, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. A 16-year-old trans girl, she said without preamble. OD'd. Parents refused to come pick her up. Called her it over the phone. Said she could rot. I said nothing. Just listened. Let her unravel. When she stopped talking, she looked at me, eyes glassy. What are we doing, River? This isn't professional. This isn't safe. No, I said. It's not. But it's honest. She reached out. Her fingers barely touched my knee. And then she pulled back. Maybe I should request a formal transfer. Make it official. Clean lines. Would that make this easier? No, she said. But it would make it real. And then she kissed me. Soft. Sudden. Like a match strike in the dark. It only lasted a second. Maybe 2. But I felt it everywhere. When she pulled back, she looked terrified. I'm sorry, she whispered. I can't. I'm supposed to be better than this. I reached up. Touched her wrist. You are better than this. That's why it's happening. That night, we didn't sleep together. We sat on that bench until the sky turned pale with morning, talking about ethics and fear and the impossible weight of being queer in a world that tries to break you gently, professionally, legally. And then she said, I'll refer you to a new doctor tomorrow. I nodded. It was the right thing to do. But my chest ached anyway. 1 week later, I got a message from her. You'll get a call from Dr. Kim's office. She's good. Trans-competent. Trustworthy. Then nothing for 3 days. Then. I miss you. Me too. I didn't write it. But I thought it 100 times. 3 months later. Fall had arrived early in the city, the trees shedding copper leaves like quiet confessions. I stood by the window of the bookstore I now worked at part-time, tracing patterns in the condensation on the glass. Somewhere in the poetry section behind me, a couple whispered about Sylvia Plath. I wasn't listening. I hadn't seen Miriam since the night she kissed me. Well, not in person. But sometimes, I'd catch glimpses of her through hospital windows when I passed by on the bus, or in the clinical journal someone left on the break room table. And sometimes, late at night, I'd open my phone to reread our last texts. I miss you. Me too. That was the end of the line. I didn't know what the rules were anymore. Whether time healed the crossing of ethical boundaries or if it just made them blurrier. I told myself I'd moved on. I told myself I didn't need closure. But every time someone new looked at me, a date, a friend, even a stranger at a gallery, I couldn't help but compare it to the way she looked at me. Like I was a page she'd already read, but couldn't put down. And then one afternoon, the door to the bookstore chimed, and there she was. Miriam. Hair still tucked behind her ears the same way. Slight crease at the corner of her eyes. But something had changed. She looked lighter. "Hi," she said, stepping into the quiet warmth of the shop. "I didn't know you worked here." My throat closed. "I didn't know you read fiction." "I don't," she said. "But I was hoping you'd be here anyway." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. She held up a brown paper bag. "I brought coffee." "You're 3 months late." "I know." I finally stepped out from behind the counter. "You could have called." "I thought about it. Every day." She looked down. "But I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That I wasn't confusing guilt with love." Silence. Then. "And now?" I asked. "I'm sure," she said. "I want to see you. Not as a doctor. Not as someone trying to save the world. Just me. Messy. Complicated. Wanting." It felt like the whole store went still. "I don't know if I can do that," I said. "I don't want to be a secret. I don't want to feel like I'm someone you only want when no one's watching." She stepped closer. "Then let's not be a secret." I laughed sharp, bitter. "It's not that easy." "Maybe not," she said. "But I'm willing to make it hard. If you are." I stared at her, heart hammering. I could see the coffee steaming through the bag. I could see her fingers trembling around it. God, she was scared. So was I. "I don't trust people who come back," I said. "I don't either," she whispered. "But I'm not coming back. I'm starting over." That night, we didn't kiss. We talked. 4 hours. She told me about the patient who broke her. The ER shifts. The board review that questioned her boundary judgment. How she stepped away from trans care altogether, not because of me, but because it stopped being sustainable for her mental health. "I kept trying to be everything to everyone," she said. "But I forgot how to be someone to anyone." I told her about the bookstore. The journal I'd started writing in again. The nights I still woke up feeling like a house with all the lights on but no one home. She reached across the table. Took my hand. No apologies. No promises. Just a hand. I cried. Right there in the cafe. She didn't let go. We started slow. Really slow. Dinner once a week. No touching. Just words. Real ones. I learned she hated cilantro and loved thunderstorms. That she once flew to Montreal just to see a film screening. That she still wore her sister's necklace under her clothes even though they hadn't spoken in years. She learned I hummed when I was anxious. That I used to collect pins but stopped after top surgery because I hated how they looked on my new body. That I still sometimes used my old name when I talked to myself in the mirror, just to see if it still hurt. It did. But less. And slowly, I stopped flinching when she touched me. One night in December, I fell asleep on her couch during a movie. When I woke up, there was a blanket on my shoulders, her hand still resting on mine, and the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. "I want you to stay," she said softly. "I already did," I whispered. That was the first night I let her see me. All of me. Scars. Fears. The tenderness I usually kept locked behind sarcasm and caution. And she held it all. Like it mattered. The winter melted into spring, and we learned how to be in the world again together. We went to Pride, hand in hand. She introduced me to her friends, even the ones who raised eyebrows. I told my mother about her, and when the call ended with silence, Miriam didn't try to fix it. She just let me crawl into her arms and cry. We built something slowly, honestly. Something not perfect, but real. And one morning, as we stood brushing our teeth in the same cramped bathroom, she turned to me, foam still on her lips, and said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "You weren't the patient I broke the rules for." She met my eyes in the mirror. "You were the reason I learned they needed changing." By the time summer came around, we had a rhythm. Mornings at the cafe, evenings at her place or mine, weekends walking the edge of the river trail, our fingers brushing, sometimes locking, sometimes just close enough to feel the warmth between us. It wasn't perfect. There were fights. She once snapped at me for leaving dishes in the sink. I once accused her of being too distant, too guarded, too afraid of letting the world see us. "I'm not hiding you," she said one night, her voice breaking. "I'm trying to protect something that still feels too fragile to survive being picked apart." "I don't want to be protected," I said. "I want to be held." And she did. She pulled me close and let me cry into her neck, and then we lay on the floor for hours, wordless, the sound of traffic outside rising and falling like waves. But the world was never far behind. One afternoon, I was at work when a man walked in tall, square-shouldered, expensive jacket and asked for me by name. "You're River Lowell," he said. "Depends who's asking." He handed me a card. It said, "Internal Review Committee, Licensing Division, State Medical Board. Miriam Valdez is being investigated for professional misconduct," he said plainly. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with her." I went cold. What kind of questions? The kind that determines whether she keeps her license. Miriam didn't know yet. That night, I showed up at her apartment, card still in my pocket, heart thudding like a warning bell. She was cooking. Garlic, something spicy, jazz playing low in the background. She turned, smiling, then paused. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. She wiped her hands on a towel and stepped forward, gently pulling me to sit. "Tell me." I gave her the card. She didn't blink. Didn't even look surprised. "They finally came," she murmured. "You knew this was coming." "I thought maybe we were safe. I stopped being your doctor. I did everything right." "They don't care," I said bitterly. "Not really." She nodded. "I'll tell them the truth," I said. "That nothing happened until after. That we followed every damn rule." "It won't matter." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't ask you to lie. And I can't stop them from twisting what they want to see." She stood, arms crossed, and for the first time in months, I saw her go distant again, that practiced clinical calm. "Miriam," I said. "Don't disappear on me." She turned to me, eyes glistening. "Do you know what it took to become a doctor? A woman. A Latina. Queer. Do you know how many times I swallowed myself to survive that system?" I stood too. "Do you think I don't understand survival? Do you think I haven't had to disappear just to get hormones, or be called by my name, or walk into a room without being stared at like a mistake?" We stared at each other, both furious, both afraid. Then she stepped forward and put her hands on my face. "I'm not scared of losing my job," she whispered. "I'm scared of losing you." My chest broke open. I reached for her. "Then we fight." The hearing was 3 weeks later. She didn't ask me to come. I came anyway. They called it a formal review. It felt like a firing squad. The boardroom was all gray suits and dry air. Miriam sat at the head, hands folded, composed. I sat in the back, holding my breath. They asked her about me. She didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "We developed a connection. After I had referred their care elsewhere, I maintained all necessary boundaries while they were under my treatment. And do you believe that reflects the ethical expectations of your profession? No, she said. But I believe it reflects the human ones. Murmurs. The panel chair leaned forward. You understand this could lead to suspension or termination of your license. I do, Miriam said. But if I'm being asked whether I would rather have kept my career clean, or lived a lie, then yes, I choose the truth. And I choose them. The room went still. Someone cleared their throat. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later. No decision made yet. Just the waiting. Outside, in the sunlight, I took her hand. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm not, she said. For once in my life, I'm not. 2 weeks passed. Then, a letter. She didn't lose her license. But she received a formal reprimand. A note in her file. A shadow that might follow her for years. She read it once, folded it in half, and put it in a drawer. I can live with that, she said. Then she kissed me. A year later, we moved in together. Not into some grand apartment with bay windows and exposed brick. Just a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator and neighbors who always cooked too much curry. But it was ours. The walls held laughter. The sink overflowed twice. We adopted a cat named Mercury who hated everyone but Miriam. Sometimes, we still fought. Sometimes, I still woke up gasping from dreams where the whole world had turned against us again. But every time I looked at her sleepy, messy, stubborn Miriam, I knew we hadn't just survived something. We'd chosen it. Over and over again. One Sunday morning, over pancakes, I asked her, do you ever miss it? The career. The certainty. Being the one in the white coat who always had the answers. She shook her head. Not as much as I thought I would. You. I blinked. What would I miss? The version of yourself you had to be before we met. I sat with that. No, I said. I don't miss them. But sometimes, I still grieve them. She nodded. That's fair. Grief doesn't mean regret. We finished breakfast in silence. And then she reached across the table. Took my hand. Just like the first time. Not out of guilt. Not out of apology. But out of love. The real kind. The kind you fight for. The end.